welcome back. You're listening to Houston Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Shanna Register, and every week we try to bring you news and information you can use on your next real estate transaction. Today I'm talking with Michael Boltz. He is a real estate attorney, a really good real estate attorney who's helped me with things. He's very knowledgeable, and I want to talk about something that we don't talk about very often, and it's something that some people think is a little bit complicated. It's easements. And, if you only buy one or two houses in your lifetime, you probably never have to deal with easements. Easements are more of an issue when you're buying land, and that's usually when you run into more issues with it, not necessarily in a subdivision at a home. But I want to talk about it because there are a lot of interesting things that can happen with easements. And I want to start... Michael has Boltz law firm in the Woodlands, and you've been around for a long time. So you've given a lot of sage advice to a lot of realtors. I know that. So let's talk a little bit about what title is. Because when I think of title, I literally think of a chain. They call it a chain of title. And I think of a chain where the links, every time someone buys or sells a property, another link is created, and it just keeps passing forward. What do you think of when you think of title?
Well, title is, in our parlance, is an estate. It's a right, it's transferable, it's enforceable, and it defines the uses and benefits that one has in the property that they acquire. And so it's a package of rights. Mm-hmm. It includes the right of possession. It includes the right to enforce the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of their land, and on and on. So, but title has so many pieces.
And easements are a piece of it.
And easements are a piece of it, yes.
What is an easement exactly?
Well, an easement is the right of a person acquired for that person to be able to use another person's land for a specific purpose. And so the three key words are right, use, and purpose. And those are the key things that separate easements from other types of estates.
Okay, so how is an easement created?
Well, there are 8 ways that, there are probably more, but the 8 ways that are generally recognized are 4 of them are by document and 4 of them are by implication.
Okay.
Now, the 4 by document are 1, an express easement. And so many times people, for example, 6 children will inherit 100 acres. Mm-hmm. They do a partition agreement.
Okay.
And when they partition the land, they should create an easement. And so they'll sit down and they'll write out the exact terms.
Okay.
That easement then, easement by expression, has all the formalities of a deed. It's in writing. It's signed by the parties against whom they'll be enforced. It describes the land specifically, and it's acknowledged so it can be recorded. And it has to show the intent, and so it has the elements of a deed.
Okay.
And then it gets recorded. So, so that's one way to create an easement, an express easement. The other kind is by reservation. Suppose I convey land to you, and I reserve a 20-foot strip on the east side of my property for ingress and egress.
So, and that's one thing that a lot of builders do is reserve some right, which eventually becomes HOA land and that kind of thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's a document, and it creates an easement by reservation.
Okay.
And it's generally not very specific. It doesn't need to be.
Okay.
Then the other kind is an easement by reference to a plat. So some builder buys 50 acres, divides it up, plats it, and on the plat there are setbacks, there are easements, and so forth. So someone who buys the property, if there's a problem, they simply go to the plat and they say, here's my right of easement.
Okay.
And then the last one is an easement by reference to a statute. The easiest one to identify would be the Open Beach Act. And so let's say you're down in Galveston. The public has a right to use that beach. And so the Open Beach Act says that from a point midway to the low tide to the line of vegetation, that's public use.
Okay.
but that moves all over the place
Sure,
with storms.
that's a moving target.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's 4 ways that it can be created that are not in writing. What are those?
Those are by implication.
Okay.
And it means that you go to a court and a judge hears your story and he says, you're right. You do have an easement, and I'm going to sign a judgment that gives you that easement.
So would that be in the case of like a dirt road that someone's been driving down for 25 years and all of a sudden somebody says, this is my land, you can't drive down it, and they go, but I've been doing it for 25 years. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the most common. It's an easement by implication.
Okay.
And each of the 4 have different requirements or elements. An easement by implication requires that, let's say you buy a property and you're the 3rd purchaser from the original time when there was 150 acres. Well, when you buy it, you see there's this road going down there. And so it's been in continual use. It's open and obvious as far as as an easement.
Right.
It's necessary for your enjoyment. Now, it may be that you're not landlocked, but it may be that if you go another way, you have to go an extra 5 miles, so
Right.
it's more convenient to use that. And it has to be in continual use. And it doesn't have to be exclusively yours. And so the courts over 100 years have been saying, yeah, that's right. That's the beauty of common law. In America, we create law by presenting facts to courts, and courts can say that should be the law, and that becomes the law. So that's an easement by implication. We have an easement by estoppel, where I buy your land, not you personally, but I buy one's land, and that person makes a promise that I can go in and out. And after I move in, a year later, they said, no, you can't use it. I'm putting a fence up. Well, the courts say, gee, it would be inequitable. It would be unfair for me to have moved in and now I can't get out.
Right.
So the courts will imply an easement by estoppel. You can't deny your promise.
Okay, and so if you've got easement, you're buying land and you have easements on it, and the easements really aren't needed anymore. So let's say, for example, there used to be a county road that went through the acreage, and the county road's been deserted for 50 years. Now it's a ATV trail kind of thing. How do you remove it? How do you get rid of it?
Great. There's 4 ways to get rid of an easement, generally speaking. The first one is the same way you create it. You can have an express release.
So whoever created it can sign to release it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, sometimes when someone owns a farm country and they had a pipeline going through it and the pipeline hadn't been used for 10 years and it's crumbling, they can ask the pipeline people to release it.
Okay.
The second way is same fact situation. The same way is that it's released by abandonment of purpose. And so if there's no longer a purpose for an easement, then that purpose excuses the easement. It gets rid of the easement. And then there is an easement then by, let me recall, merger, excuse me. So suppose that Farmer Brown sold the property to Farmer Green, then Farmer Green eventually buys Farmer Brown's property. Well, those 2 parcels merge.
Right.
And there's no easement because there's no right left over.
Okay. All right. Let's talk just a minute here about use of an easement. It's specifically for the person in the title that says it's given to, right? Is there are there problems? Do you see problems with them?
Easements are very common lawsuits. It's just surprising. The general rule is this, that the person who uses the easement has the right to full exercise and can assert the right necessary and enjoyable for that easement.
Okay.
But it can only be to the minimum amount necessary to not overburden the person whose land is being crossed.
Okay.
And so this is why there's so many lawsuits, because the person using the easements saying, hey, that person's running cows on my easement. I've got a problem here. I've got to stop and get out of the car and open gates. And the courts will decide has a person whose land is being crossed interfered with the person who's using it.
Okay, all right. And then my last question is, if you do buy some landlocked land, which is very unusual, but if you do, what do you do about it? How should you handle that?
Well, my humble suggestion is that if you come across some land you think it's very attractive, before you go ahead and put your earnest money up or sign a contract, and you see it's landlocked, you ask your realtor to talk to the realtor of the seller, and you say, is there a recorded easement? What is the assurance that if I buy this property that I'll be able to use it? There's been many cases where, for example, an easement by estoppel is not enforceable against
the next buyer.
Right, because he didn't make a representation.
Okay, so even though the seller had it, it doesn't necessarily transfer to the buyer.
Doesn't necessarily.
So the buyer needs to make sure it's put in place.
Yeah, the four that are not recorded. Now, an easement by easement by prescription, meaning that you used it for at least 10 years, you're the only one using it, not the owner. That doesn't go away.
Okay.
But the other easements could go away because they're not enforceable under the facts of the situation.
Yeah, I've seen some properties like that where you have to drive through someone else's property to get to it because it's landlocked, and you assume since there's a driveway that you have an easement, but you need to make sure it's written in and that it's protected.
Yeah, and you need to make sure it's the seller's representation upon which you're relying as a buyer. And I would, again, there'll be just nothing more tragic than spending $150,000 on a piece of land that you can't use. I would reach an agreement as part of the contracting process that I will be able to have ingress and egress. I would document it
in the contract. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, lots of good information. If there's anyone out there who wants to contact you over at Boltz Law, how can they reach you?
Well, my office number is 832-381-3070. And my cell phone, I use that all the time.
You actually answer it. You're one of the few few who answer it.
Yeah, it's quicker than leaving messages. So my cell phone, call me on that. It's area code 630-730-5000.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. You do lots of great work in the real estate industry. What is your main focus? Is it on real estate as a real estate attorney?
3 areas: real estate, business law, and wills and probate. Those are the only 3 areas I work in because one of your clients is going to be involved in the other 2 sooner or later.
At some point. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate it. Michael Boltz from Boltz Law. We appreciate you coming on Houston Real Estate Radio. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. You can find us online and see the videos in beautiful HD at HoustonRealEstateRadio.com.
RREA Media has an exciting new product available to companies and organizations who are teaching classes and want to offer those classes online. Introducing Easy Distance Learning. Easy Distance Learning is a video-based distance learning system that allows companies and organizations to leverage their existing classroom content into a broader reach and increased revenues. Did you know that the rate of growth of distance learning is 10 times that of classroom education? And 66% of chief academic officers think distance learning is critical to their long-term strategy. Right now, 33% of higher education students are taking at least one online class. Companies and organizations not offering a distance alternative to in-class instruction risk being left behind. Video-based distance learning has 3 basic components: classroom capture, post-production, and content distribution. Easy Distance Learning is a comprehensive and modular system that covers all 3 components that can help your organization with what you are missing in offering a quality and convenient online learning experience. You choose the parts you need help with. Easy Distance Learning offers another revenue stream, a broader reach of your existing content, and a professional presentation with a great learner experience. Contact us today for a free estimate and see how easy distance learning can take your company or organization to the next level.